Welcome back to the Women in Sports series brought to you by Black Sports Network. I'm your host. What's going on, y'all? This is Brianna DeBose. I'm here with Dr. Candice Williams. Very excited to have you on the series. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, to kind of run down your stats a little bit, if you all do not know, Dr. Candice Williams is currently at I always have to say the in front of it because y'all get real particular about it, the Ohio State University. You're, always been an advocate for mental health. You're in that space as a practitioner. You were at the NFL Players Association. You were working with former NFL athletes there. So, you have quite a resume, doctorate in counselor and education, all the stats. I love it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. When I think about my journey, I'm like, okay, I'm only 35. I'll be 36 at the end of this week. And I'm like, wow, I've been able to accomplish a lot in a short amount of time.
You have,
and build a in this field. And so when people play it back, I'm like, is me. That's me.
Oh yeah. NFLPA mental health crisis team, all the stats, like you were in it, all up in it. And happy early birthday, by the way. I did not know that. So, in case if I don't see you on socials, I'll be sure to make sure I have happy birthday early. Tell you happy birthday early. So to kind of start this off, spring is upon us, thankfully. The weather's starting to break a little bit. The new year's here. What is something that you are really excited about in 2021?
Well, I'm excited about the fact that, our student athletes who did not get a season in 2020 are actually, competing in 2021, which has been exciting to see. Our women's softball team just went to Florida. They had an amazing time for the second time. They went down there, they got some sun, got to get away from the cloudy weather. But just seeing our athletes, just really take off from being in quarantine to, putting in the work, consistently training, and just to see them flourish. I have BTN Plus, which is Big Ten Network. I am on there constantly watching them, rooting for them, because it's an exciting thing to see, especially when I'm so used to being out at practice, being in the mix with them. And I haven't been able to do that because of COVID. So that is kind of what I'm looking forward to, is all of our fall sports who are playing in the spring, and our spring sports been able to compete, as well. So
yeah, absolutely. It's been a heck of a year, to say the least, or a heck of, almost we're rolling into the second year. It's been
the extension of 2020.
Yes, extended edition, deluxe, to say the least. What sports teams are you working with at Ohio State, or is it kind of just like everyone?
So there's 4 full-time, mental health providers there. So 2 sports psychologists, and then myself and another colleague of mine are athletic counselors. And so we had the teams split. So my teams include men's basketball, football, men's lacrosse. What are the other ones? I just went blank. They're probably going to be like, you don't remember that you have us? Gymnastics, women's gymnastics. And then I have one more sport that I'm thinking of that I can't think of right now. But for the most part, the one that I'm more integrated with, I could say, out of all of them in this past season would have been football. And so I was able to, during the 2020 season, be more visible per the coach's request, to be able to be around so that those athletes could be like, oh, there's Candice in the weight room. Like, let me go talk to her. I need to chop it up with her. I have something going on, anywhere from, I'm not sleeping well, to have something going on with my, the person I'm dating, to, I'm having a hard time adjusting to COVID. Being around the athletes and being visible has definitely worked to my benefit in terms of them utilizing the services too.
Absolutely. I mean, I wish that was on next, I could just point over there and be like, let me go chat, when I was playing sports in college, because it's so crucial. I mean, mental health is literally, it's competing against, well, honestly, I would say it's the most important, period. It's the most important. Your mentals are your foundation to anything that
Absolutely.
you do, especially sports. And so I'm happy that they were able to see you and see that, you know, you're there to support them and it's a safe space and it's like confidential and all of that. Now, you know, we kind of touched on your journey a bit, but please tell us, like, what was it like, that transition from the NFLPA to college athletics? Please tell us about how that went down, why you wanted to come, you know, back to the university setting, and what was that like?
So for me, working with former NFL players, I loved that job in the sense that it was remote. I did everything via phone, right?
Really?
So if I had a former player as a therapist, I was so used to seeing people in person. And then when I took that role, I was helping former players like navigate mental health resources. So if I had somebody on the West Coast who was suicidal and he needed to get to the hospital, you know, I'm calling the nearest hospital, like, hey, I got such and such coming in. He needs to go through the VIP. He doesn't need to go into the ER. Or if they needed a therapist, I was vetting those individuals. And so the beautiful part about that job was I got to know the person based off of their voice. Imagine never seeing someone in person, right? Not just Zoom, because we now have COVID, but back then it was, no one thought to say, let me video chat with this person to see how they're doing. We operated off of, you know, a free conference call and the phone and text message. So a lot of my communication with, you know, former players, their wives, their loved ones, some of them, the former agents, was I have a person who's in crisis and I had to use my, you know, one of the biggest skills that I have to use as a therapist is my listening skills and decipher those different things. And so, you know, in doing that job and loving what I did, I realized that I wanted to help get ahead of the curve. Right. So a lot of the things that I was doing with some of the former players in terms of the mental health aspect of it was, here are men who, you know, played collegiate football, entered into the league, and then they're in a different journey in their lives. And now they're having to figure out who they are as a person. Right. Versus putting the person before the student and the athlete. So we're not at risk of losing all three. Right. And so now transitioning it to Ohio State, I actually had an interview with University of Arkansas.
Okay.
And so one of their athletic directors slid in my LinkedIn DMs and was like, hey, have you ever thought about like working
with
the collegiate athletics? I was like, you know, people don't sleep on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the key. Like I've used LinkedIn since 2011, 2012. I have another story about sliding into somebody's DM in terms of job, but like, so they, you know, their athletic director slid into my DMs, assistant athletic director at the time of student athlete experience, and said, have you ever explored an idea, like an opportunity of working, you know, as a therapist? And I was like, not really, but share more. And so I went and interviewed there, and literally as I was leaving there, I had gotten an email from Ohio State saying we would like to interview you for a job as well. And so I, you know, went straight from Arkansas, waited a couple of weeks, flew up to Ohio State and interviewed. And what again prompted me, you know, I wasn't even looking for a job, but this person was like, hey, you're an African-American female. You already work with a particular population related to athletes, professionally. You know, there needs to be more people that look like you in this space. And it just so happened that being able to transition to Ohio State in that moment, you know, the athletes themselves, you know, before I even got there, which I'm assuming what prompted somebody like me there, was that they wanted people that looked like them.
Yes.
You know, so, and I realized how important that was for our African-American student athletes. You know, that they have someone who is a representation of what wellness looks like, who can meet them where they are, right? It's a difference when I'm, you know, Dr. Candice Williams and I am sitting here saying, how does that make you feel? Versus, hey, let's chop it up. Let me have a moment with you, walk and talk with me, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of code switching, but, you know, it was one of those things where it was a good fit for me because of course, the athletes wanted somebody that looked like me there. And just with my expertise, being able to be in an environment and realize like, okay, if we want to increase the utilization rate of this particular group of athletes, how do we do that? And I feel like I had the skill set and the ability to, and, that very much is shown in our utilization rate of Black and Brown student athletes.
Absolutely. I mean, representation's huge. Everyone's on diversity and inclusion right now. It's like a hot topic. It's like the it topic. But it matters when you talk about representation, when you talk about just culturally aware of kind of what's going on behind the scenes, and you can just feel it, you can receive it, and that matters. And, being at a Power 5 school, you're with elite athletes anyway. I don't even know how many draft picks Ohio State has. It's probably like ridiculous at this point. But, you're still kind of in that realm of like professionalism in a way, because you're at elite school and these athletes are going to be professionals because they're in that space. So I guess one question I have for you, like what challenge are you kind of seeing in college athletes, in the college athletic space, especially around mental health right now? I know you mentioned the pandemic, which has been huge, obviously kind of wearing on all of us, but like, what are some other things that you kind of see that you want to be working on going forward?
Well, if you had asked me prior to, the pandemic, I would say, just really encouraging athletes to utilize, mental health resources in terms of the stigma, in terms of fostering help-seeking behaviors, in terms of, giving them coping skills, in terms of how to adjust, right? And now I think COVID has kind of put us in a space where it has kind of forced us to kind of develop those skills, right? To go from being mentally fragile to mentally agile in that case. And so even now, as I think back to some of my experiences with student athletes during COVID, it's like being able to, help people in general in this country, but more so this particular population, of how do you adapt and what does that look like, right? When you go from having a regimented schedule, when you go to having all these different things, and then it's like, okay, now I have too much time. Right. And then now, depending on which conference you're in, what your university is ascribing to in terms of education, you might have athletes who are doing nothing but online classes. So the monotony of doing the same thing every day,
right? It's
regimented, but then you also have the autonomy to figure out, do I want to study in the morning? Do I want to study after lift? Nobody's making me go to class, but I still have to show up virtually and get things done. And so I think being able to look at it as, nothing that you're doing is about wasting time, and that every unplanned situation is not a call to battle. Like you have these skills, we just need to hone them and you can figure it out. One of the things that I've been trying to tell my athletes is that you can't just train your body from the neck down. You have to also train it from the neck up, right? So just like your hamstring and your quads and your triceps and biceps, you go into the weight room and your objective is to get stronger, is to get, is to be able to lift more. What do you think your mind is also doing? It is a muscle in itself, and it's split into various different parts and has various different functions. It's even connected to your spinal cord, which sends nerves to the rest of your body to either function voluntarily or involuntarily. So if you're not edifying that with books, education in terms of outside of, what you're learning in class, but you're not, providing it with the good, healthy mental, exercises and stretches, or even recovery and sleep that it needs, it's going to be hard for you to adjust. So when we think about the mind and think about mental health, I tell people it's no different than your physical fitness, right? But your mind also needs to be mentally fit, or, is relying on certain behavioral things that you're doing to be able to make sure that it gets the rest and recovery it needs, so that you can manage your mood better, or that you can move from one thing to the next. So when I think of COVID now, I'm like, this big thing about self-care, who you are as a person, what other things, are you passionate about outside of your sport, are equally as important as you going on that field or being in that gym, putting forth effort to compete weekend after weekend.
For sure. I mean, you hit it on the nail right there. I think a lot of people don't know about this, but I mean, as an elite level athlete, as a Division I athlete, your schedule is so regimented. It's like, oh, you have some free time. I'm like, no, I don't. No, I that's not even feasible. Everything is from the start of when you wake up to when you go to sleep. It's like very strategic. And, for athletes, a lot of times when that changes, trying to be able to pivot and be flexible, it's like, I don't want to do this. Why is everything so different? So I can only imagine. I mean, I've been out of the game for a little bit now, and I'm still just like, why'd you change the meeting at the last second? Like, what's going on? Because it's just, you're so used to everything being so regimented, people being on time, things happening when they're supposed to happen. But like in the real world, when you're out and about, people will cancel on you. People will just, things are very drastically different. So I'm glad that even though it came, obviously with tragedy and loss and everything else that's happened this year, it came and you had to work on it. We all had to kind of face what we needed to work on this year. So I'm glad they have someone like you.
And it was the invisible opponent, right? I remember talking to the football, guys and saying, yep, you're playing, this team on Saturday, but like the invisible opponent is COVID, right? Every team in America, or at least in the conference of Big Ten, are having to be mindful of what they do on a day-to-day basis, even if it's the same thing every day. To be mentally agile in the sense of it's not good or bad, it just is, and if you can't find not necessarily the silver lining in everything, but okay, how did I grow today on Wednesday versus Tuesday, even though I'm doing the same thing every day? Yeah. If you can find a little bit of that in terms of that growth mindset, that's what's going to take somebody from good to great. If you look at every team in America who's playing during football season, how is it that Alabama has been able to be more successful than anybody else? Right? When it comes down to it, they all have to get on the field and perform, but it's making sure that, you're recognizing, okay, it's not a lack of talent. It may not even be a lack of discipline. It could be a lack of insight. Of like, what does all of this mean for me in this particular moment? How is it making me feel? Am I recognizing that? And then what am I going to do about it moving forward?
Absolutely. All of it. I mean, not only the invisible opponent in COVID, but like your mind is technically invisible, like your thoughts, right? You're alone with your thoughts all the time. So that's huge. Thank you for just kind of elaborating on that more, because it's so important. Mental health is it's at the epitome of everything that we do. But I want to pivot a little bit because it is Women's History Month currently. Now, what is something that you have experienced this month, I'm intrigued to know, that has kind of made you feel seen and celebrated and affirmed as a Black woman during Women's History Month? It can be a post that you saw. It could be something that you did, anything.
Well, you know what? It has actually been, and, shout out to, I know it's Women's History Month, but I want to say shout out to the brothers out there who are recognizing women such as myself and various other women who are in positions to be able to, really use their skill set and their talent, So I think it's the National Coalition of Minority Coaches. I was invited and we'll be speaking on, I think, Wednesday to that group.
Cool. Congratulations.
Clubhouse is, again, if you use LinkedIn and Clubhouse appropriately, it can lead to opportunities.
Keyword appropriately.
Appropriately.
It definitely can, though.
Strategically and appropriately. But, I have a speaking engagement from that. And then the I think it's African American Performance Coaches Association reached out to me this week asking if I could participate in one of their coaches clinics. I was highly recommended in terms of invited to come back after speaking with them.
That's awesome.
Last month. So, it just affirmed that not just, talking about mental health is important, right? But giving people who do this every day, who have the credentials to do this, the stage to be able to speak, to folks in a way that is digestible, the way that it helps decrease the stigma. I'm not a person that's going to sit here and be like, well, the da 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 and blah 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 blah. I'm like, listen here, let me holler at y'all. This is what this is.
Let's chat for a sec.
Right. And so the fact that I'm my authentic self when I show up to spaces and I'm passionate about this, and people are like, oh, we got to get her in front of an audience. We got to get her in front of our group. Like that to me was like, a high from this week of like, and I will say this, I was not expecting, I put a post on Instagram recently on a quote that said, we have to put the person before the student and the athlete, otherwise we're at risk of losing all three. And that quote like blew up. Like I have student athletes who are sharing it left and right. I have people following me now that I'm like, okay, people are taking note of student athlete mental health, even the athletes themselves, and really, being, showing up social media or whether it be, in their own respective universities and saying mental health is very much a topic of conversation and a part of our performance and who we are. And so just to see that on Instagram, like it just, and then I got on Twitter. I'm not really active on Twitter, but to see the strength coach from Ohio State share that and other people sharing it, and it got like 200 likes. And I'm like, wow. Okay, then people are,
they paying attention.
For sure. So that really made me kind of proud and kind of step back, and I'm like, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I remember wanting to get into this space in 2012. So in 2012, when I started my PhD program, I was like, if I wanted to be an expert in anything, what would it be? And at the time, it was student athlete mental health. Like, I think that was around the time that things came out with CTE in terms of that being, introduced to the sports world related to mental health and brain health. But, in 2012, I had started my PhD program, and I actually slid in the DMs of the NFL player engagement Facebook page, like a month before that. Like I was like, oh, if I could work anywhere, like if I could do an internship anywhere. At the time, I was working as a therapist at a non-for-profit, for students who were, victims of a crime or sexual abuse. Like I was, very much in that space, which has served me well in the work that I do now, even with athletes, but wanted to transition there and was like, I'm just going to go for it. And they had reached out maybe a month later and was like, send me your resume. I did an interview. I was ready to quit my PhD program and go to New York and be an intern. And interviewed, and they were like, you're overqualified for this. We would have loved to have you, but we don't have the space, the capacity, keep pounding the pavement. You're going to do fine. We have no doubt, to give you the farewell. And so, worked as a therapist, was in my PhD program. Every opportunity that I got to do research on student athlete mental health, I did. I did a pilot study with a women's basketball team on like, where did they go for help? I spoke at different conferences on this topic. And then towards the end of my PhD program, when I got into the dissertation phase, I said, I have to take a leap of faith. So I actually quit my full-time job as a therapist, all my good benefits, moved back home with my parents, and decided to take a 6-month grad assistantship in compliance at the university that I was getting my PhD at, Sam Houston State University, Huntsville, Texas. And so went and interviewed there. There was a job posting that came up for, they needed a compliance assistant. It was not a graduate assistantship. So I made $7.25 for 6 months for 19 hours. Okay. Quit my good job.
With benefits.
And worked in compliance. And worked in compliance for 6 months. Athletic compliance, learning everything from evaluating transcripts for recruits to, looking at coaches, recruiting schedules and making sure there wasn't in a dead period or whatever the case may be, logging in literally at a computer. My whole future PhD self has worked in college academic advising to working in, mental health as a, mental health therapist, sitting in front of a computer, logging in hours from, coaches of were they in a 20-hour period, an 8-hour period, and really looked at that opportunity as, okay, this is, I can learn the behind the scenes stuff related to,
right,
student athletes in terms of a day in the life. Of them from a standpoint of compliance, academics. So I got a kind of a snapshot of what that was. So then I was at a event where I was I think faculty judge for undergrad students who were learning how to submit or learning how to present in terms of at different types of research. So like they were going and presenting their research to different conferences, but we allowed them an opportunity to, enter into this conference, and then faculty of Sam Houston State University or people who are support staff can give them some critiques on their presentation skills. So I was doing that, and one of the parents of one of the students I was, judging was like, "Hey, have you ever?" He had graduated from Texas A&M, which is where I got my undergrad, and he was, "Have you ever thought about like working at the NFLPA?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, I want to work for the NFL." And they, I did an interview, and I didn't get it, but so at the time, that day, actually, I went on the NFLPA website, and they had a position for the trust, which is the department within the NFLPA, powered by the NFLPA. And they were specifically looking for someone with mental health experience. And so I applied in like May, maybe late April, got an interview in May and was hired started in July. And so even before that, I remember reaching out to my mentors, and keep in mind, back when in 2011, 2012, there was no LinkedIn. I mean, it was just getting started.
Right.
I was online, reaching out to people based off of their website or whatever number had popped up or email, trying to get an understanding of like, what was their experience like working at the league level, working, at a different team, from a mental health standpoint. And every person I talked to was like, "You're doing everything right. You're networking, you're honing your skills." And I'm like, "No, I need the plug. I need the plug." Little did I know. Right. Little did I know the plug came at a networking event who had nothing to do with sports.
Right.
And was like, "Maybe you should try this." I'm like, bet. So I did that. And if I think back to my experience, the time from 2012 when I started my PhD to 2014 when I was working for $7.25, like I literally was networking. Everything that I have been able to do, networking has been the thread of it all. And part of that was even keeping people up to speed with what I was doing.
Yes. That's what I was that's what I was thinking.
Right. Even if that person didn't have anything to offer you other than you're doing excellent, you're doing everything right. When I accomplish something, "Hey, such and such and such, just want to let you know I went and spoke at this thing. Hope all is well." Like people don't realize that networking isn't just reciprocity in the sense of like, what can I get from you and what can I give you? But there are people who are helping you along your journey who want to know what you're doing in the event that you say, "Hey, I'm putting you down as a reference." Right. Then if you put them down as a reference and somebody calls them, they're like, "I haven't heard from this person in like years. I don't know what type is this? Who are we talking about again?" Like to make yourself relevant in that sense, but also to keep in touch with those folks because it's a relationship. Right. And so, I mean, I worked at the Texans for game day staff, for $7.25 back then when that was minimum wage.
You got it down to a T, like to the cent. This is how much I was getting paid. And I hope everybody who is listening to this knows that it's not all glitz and glam when you're working in sports. It is not. And sometimes you have to take those jobs so that you can get to where you want to go in the long run. And I'm happy
Absolutely.
I'm happy that you mentioned networking. I'm all like, yes. But I'm happy that you met with networking, because it's important, right? Like at the end of the day, networking, there's talkers, right? And there's doers. The people that are just down for the conversations, down for the, mentorship, give you advice. Cool. Let me know where you land, all of that, but they can't really do anything for you, or they aren't really proactive enough. And then there's the doers. Absolutely. There's the doers over here that be like, oh, okay, bet. Like, what do you need? X, Y, and Z. Great. Let me go see if I know someone. I'll get back with you tomorrow. So
absolutely,
there's a balance.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite networkings, I have two that I love to tell people, is that like when I was at the Texans when I didn't get the internship with, the NFL league office, I actually worked at the Texans for game day staff. So when you apply for game day staff on any, sports team, there's a list of things that you double, like, what do you want to do? And like, you pick the first one. There's no guarantee you might get it.
Right.
But, I didn't want to be out there parking lot pimping, directing people where to go on game day. That's not my ministry. I'm not doing that. So it was like, okay, I have a whole, therapy background, right? So the person who hired me was in ticketing and like the suites. She was like, I need someone with your skill set to be able to navigate these fans when they get, a little unruly. Right. So my job for game day staff at the Houston Texans was working in the, not the suites, but like I can't think of the levels. It's one of the, it's not the ground level. It's like in between the suites and the ground level. It'll come to me, the club level. So basically you could sit out there out in the stadium, and then you could come in, and then there's, bar and then different entertainment and stuff like that. So my job was handling any customer service related issues with fans. And then also, kicking people out of the bar, so when the Texans won, they got an extra hour to drink. And I remember being like, okay, it's time to go home. And so I mean, my skill set as a therapist really worked in relating to people. But one of the cool things about that was at the time I was like, oh, maybe I want to be a player director of an NFL team. What better way to try to figure out how to network with that person? So my boss, her office was right next door to the director of player development.
Oh, and she connected. Yeah.
Right.
You never know
what I want. Right. And to this day, even though I had worked a full season there, I had never met him face to face, have never met him still face to face. Right.
Wow.
So networked with him back in 2011, 2012. Come to find out, the job that I was interviewing for, that executive director used to be a director of player development for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he and the Houston Texans guy knew each other.
Right. Wow.
Right. So here I am, speaking to this person from the Texans on the phone via email, keeping him up to speed of like, hey, I went and presented at this conference, and, these are how many people attended my session on student athlete mental health. Just, whether he responded or not, usually it was like, Candice, thanks you for keeping me updated. Then I applied for this job, and then I'm like, hey, Sean, I'm going to put you down as a reference. And he's like, go for it. And then also at that time, through Sean Washington, who was a former DPE for the Texans, he connected me with their therapist who was on staff. He was like, Candice, maybe not a DPE, but look at being a therapist for a team, if that's what you want to do. And so connecting with her at the time and getting to know a day in the life for her, a therapist. And then also, being able to meet other people who are therapists on different NFL teams. Fast forward, I get the job at the Trust, and then guess where my first meeting is at?
Where?
The NFL league office.
Wow, that's crazy.
Talk about 2012, being like, oh, I applied for an internship, didn't get it. And then my first meeting in my new role is at the NFL league office, and their director, he was the director of mental health or clinical wellness at the time, Dwight Collier, who's now at the University of North Carolina.
Yeah.
He, with the Tar Heels over there, I walk into the room and he was like, "Oh, I just talked to Dr. Tinsley about you." And I'm like, I don't even know this person, but I've been trying to connect with this person for the longest. And so to your point earlier, and I hope people hear and get this, like networking is vital and it's key, but your reputation follows you also.
Yes, it does.
So, not only just networking, but then how you, just like when people say, send that email after you do that interview, it matters. Those things matter in networking as well. And so I've just been blessed to be able to take every opportunity, network, but also have something to give back in the sense of whether that's an update, whether that is connecting the people that I networked with other people. And then I have another story, which this one kind of threw me for a loop as a professional, even was I was able to network so my research actually for my dissertation is student athlete pregnancy. And student athletes transitioning from being student athletes to experiencing that pregnancy while they were competing to motherhood.
Wow.
And so, had to switch my dissertation topic. My mentor had given me, one of my mentors had given me this topic. So I ran with it. And then I was trying to network with people to try to figure out, okay, for one, would the NCAA be open to like helping me with my research? And then two, where would I get my participants from? Because there's no data on it.
Right. People are actively like, who's pregnant? Who's not? Who's this? Who's that?
Right. So I remember networking with someone at the NCAA office, and I called her because my network said, call her. She's going to answer the phone. Let her know what you need. Literally, this woman says to me, and she's in a VP position at the NCAA, what do you need from me? There was no, hey, Candice, such on call. How are you doing? Da, 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 da. I mean, this woman is busy. It took all like 2 minutes. Point. Right. And I said, I need you to connect me with such and such, because I had already went on the website. Like, okay, who do I need to talk to? They're probably not going to talk to me because they get so many emails every day with requests. And she connected me with that person via email before I even got off the phone with her. And it was just like, you get what you ask. Right? Right. And so many times, even in the position I'm in now, people will say, oh, I want to pick your brain. And I always tell people, what are your top 3 questions that you want to know? If nothing was off limits and you wanted to ask, I need you to give me those top 3, because anything else that's vague or general, you can find on the internet. And I'm not saying, hey, I'm top dog or any of this nature, but you could literally Google my name.
Time is currency.
Get to the point. Right. Absolutely. And like, even when I was networking with people, I was like, okay, if I could pick this person's brain, what's one thing that I would want to know? And one of my questions typically was like, what kind of end do you have? Like, is this a person who's going to be able to help push my career along?
Yes.
And how do I ask that in a way that doesn't seem like I'm cloud chasing or I'm just trying to hang on to people's coattails? But, there's an art and a science to it. And I think people don't realize that if you lead with professionalism and humility, and you're really good at what you do, then people will take heed to that and be like, okay, this person is on their style. You know what? I rocks with you. Let me get you with such and such and such. Right. Because they're going to be people who are like, I am not exposing you to my network, because then if I connect someone with a good friend of mine, they're going to be like, who did you send to me? Like, what is this person? They're not willing to work. And I think people don't realize that, like, outside of being connected to somebody's name because of their status or their title, you also have to be mindful that, these people don't want to have a reputation of connecting folks to their network and not willing to, again, lead with professionalism, humility, and understand that your reputation is following you and could potentially be connected to them.
Oh, that's real. I mean, there has been student athletes or just students in general that I have worked with previously and be like, hey, can you connect me with so-and-so? Or can you do you know anybody in this space or that space? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I get them the information, reach out to my connection, get them the information, follow up all of that, and then check in with them and be like, hey, did you contact so-and-so? And they say, oh, I forgot. Or, oh, I just, it's on my calendar. I haven't, we talked briefly, but I didn't really follow up or whatever. Like that matters. That's crucial. Literally on my watch right now, it says, take action. An inch of movement will bring you closer to your goals than a mile of intention. Like, be about the action. Be about the action. Now, that information was great. I hope everybody was listening gets all the gems from it. I want to move into some quick fire questions with you. You have to answer in one sentence or less or one word or less.
Okay.
All right.
This should be.
Who's your favorite athlete?
JJ Watt.
Wow.
He's not with Texas anymore. He's now with Arizona.
I know. I saw that trade.
And the because of the fact that, hence the Houston Texans, helmet in the back. But he was a rookie when I started my first season there. So I remember watching him warm up on the field and seeing him his rookie year to who he is now. And I've been able to meet him, on different occasions in terms of going to different events when I was working at the NFLPA. So he's been my favorite athlete because of his consistency with his career. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Where's the favorite place or your favorite place that you've traveled?
Dominican Republic.
Good place to go.
Every time I go out of the country, I'm not concerned with the resort. I'm like, where is the hood of said country? So when I was at the Dominican Republic, I was there for a mission trip. Right. And we very much we were in the thick of where
you were in the trenches.
People. Right. So, I got to hear Dominican Republic trap music for the first time. I was okay.
That was probably live.
It was in Spanish. I was not able to decipher what was said, but I knew that it was something that was fire because I was like, yep, I don't want the resort. And then when I went to Costa Rica, we did the same thing. It was, we were in the heart of the city. We got to see where the people lived. I'm like, I don't need the resort. I need to see and breathe and be around the people.
Authentically. So. That's dope. Yes. Shoot. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Remain cool, calm, and collective. So that's by my father. My dad is all about, no matter what, maintain your position. If you're not having fun, don't do it. But nothing should be to the point to where even if you react, you got to come back to being grounded. So when I was in college, it was the 3 C's: cool, calm, and collected. So that's how I operate.
To the T. Lastly, what is your favorite game that you've ever attended? And you've probably attended some games.
Okay, so my first Super Bowl, when it was in Arizona, when there was the Seahawks playing against the Patriots, and they literally had an opportunity to win that game, and it just didn't go well. And then we were behind a bunch of, in front of a bunch of, in the section with a bunch of Patriots fans, and my heart just dropped. Now, granted, I'm not a Seahawks fan, but in that moment, I wanted them to beat the Patriots because I am not a Patriots fan. Any team against the Patriots, but it was to be there and to feel the energy, to really sit there and be like, okay, I have come full circle. I'm at a Super Bowl game. I ain't paid for this. This is work related. This is awesome, right?
Charge it to the work credit card.
Right. It's like, you've made it when you go to certain places and you're like, the average person doesn't get to go to these or has to spend X amount of money, right? I went to Hall of Fame and was like, there go Jackets here. And I remember my mom telling me when I first got the job, make sure you get people's autographs. And I said, Mom, I want to do my work in such a way that they know who I am. Not so much me knowing who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to, building a reputation for yourself in a position where, you have the opportunity to change people's lives.
Mm.
And, it's a selfless job, but there are people who know my name because they have interacted with me in such a way that I've taken good care of them and their family, mentally and emotionally. So,
Wow. And that, we gonna end it on that. Well, that is Dr. Candice Williams. Thank you so much for being a part of our Women in Sports series here at BSN, from the Ohio State University. I have to make sure I have that in there. Thanks for taking the time out to be with us.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.